I need to start with the number because the number is the whole story. $180,000. That is what my commission should have been. Not my salary, my commission. The money specifically owed to me for a single sale I had spent 14 months closing. The biggest account in the company's history, by a distance that made the second biggest account look ordinary. I want to walk you through everything properly because this story has layers that matter. If I just told you the ending, which is satisfying, I promise, you wouldn't fully understand why the ending felt the way it did. So let's start from the beginning. I had worked for a family-owned industrial equipment dealership for 11 years, not a glamorous industry. Heavy machinery, service contracts, parts supply, the kind of business that runs on relationships built over years rather than clever marketing. You earn trust slowly, you keep accounts through consistency, and every now and then, if you're good at what you do, one of those slow-built relationships becomes something significant. The account I'm talking about, I'll call them Meridian, was a regional manufacturing group that had been buying equipment from one of our competitors for close to a decade. I had been quietly cultivating a relationship with their procurement director for 3 years before any real movement happened. Lunch meetings, following up on industry news relevant to their business, understanding their maintenance cycles well enough to anticipate their needs before they did. This is the part of sales nobody talks about. The part that happens long before any proposal is written. The part that looks like nothing from the outside. My boss, I'll call him Frank, occasionally asked about Meridian in quarterly reviews. I gave him honest updates, slow progress, relationship building, long game. He didn't express particular interest. Meridian wasn't on the company's radar as a realistic prospect because they'd been with the competitor for so long. Frank mostly focused on accounts that were already in the pipeline rather than ones that required patience he didn't have, which suited me fine, because it meant he wasn't paying close attention. Month 14 was when Meridian's procurement director called me directly, not to ask for a proposal, to tell me they were ready to switch and that they wanted to do it in a way that minimized disruption. He trusted me specifically to manage the transition. That phone call was the result of 3 years of consistent, patient relationship work. I put together a proposal over the following 2 weeks. Equipment packages across 4 of their facilities, multi-year service contracts, parts supply agreements, the kind of deal that doesn't just represent a sale. It represents an ongoing revenue relationship worth multiples of the initial purchase. The initial sale alone came to just over $2.3 million. My commission structure, which I had signed when I joined the company 11 years earlier, and which had been reaffirmed in writing at each annual review, set my commission rate at a specific percentage of gross sale value on new major accounts above a defined threshold. At that rate, on a sale of this size, my commission came to just under $180,000. I submitted the signed contracts on a Tuesday afternoon. I was called into Frank's office on Wednesday morning. Frank looked, when I walked into his office, like a man who had been up most of the night working on something. He congratulated me on the Meridian deal. He said it was a tremendous achievement. He used the word unprecedented, which I don't think I'd ever heard Frank use before. Then he slid a document across his desk. It was a revised commission structure, dated the previous day, Tuesday, the same day I had submitted the Meridian contracts. The new structure, which Frank explained with a composure that I suspect cost him some effort to maintain, implemented a tiered cap on commission payments for single transactions above a certain value. The cap it introduced, for deals in the range of Meridian's sale, was $50,000. Not $180,000, $50,000. He framed it as a company-wide policy update that had been in development for some time. He said it was about sustainable compensation structure. He said he hoped I understood. I sat there for a moment and thought about what to say. What I said was that I'd need some time to review the document and that I'd have some questions for him afterward. He said, of course, take whatever time I needed. I picked up the document, thanked him, and went back to my desk. And then I called a lawyer. My lawyer's name was Christine. She had handled employment law for 15 years and had a specific focus on commission disputes, which I only discovered when I called the general number for her firm and described what had happened. She asked me to send everything over before we talked properly. My signed employment contract from 11 years ago. Every annual review document where the commission structure had been referenced or reaffirmed. My commission statements from the previous 4 years showing how commissions had been calculated on previous sales. And the document Frank had just given me, dated Tuesday. She called me back that afternoon. The conversation was short. She said what I was describing, a retroactive change to commission terms applied specifically to a sale already completed under different terms, was a textbook case of wage theft. She said the Tuesday dating of the document, specifically in relation to the Tuesday submission of the Meridian contracts, would be very difficult for the company to explain in front of a judge. She also said something I hadn't considered yet. She asked whether I had any sense of whether this had happened to anyone else. I thought about that for a while after we hung up. I had been at this company for 11 years. I knew people across every department. Not everyone well, but well enough to have the kind of peripheral conversations that become useful in certain circumstances. Over the following week, quietly and carefully, I had 4 conversations with colleagues who had been with the company longer than 5 years. Not about my situation specifically, about theirs, about how commission payments had worked for them historically, whether anything had ever changed in ways that surprised them. 2 of those conversations revealed something I had not expected. One colleague, a service contracts manager who had been there 16 years, told me about a bonus he'd been promised for landing a multi-year maintenance agreement 3 years earlier, a verbal promise from Frank. When the agreement was signed, the bonus had been significantly reduced from what he'd understood it to be. He'd raised it with Frank, accepted a partial compromise, and moved on. He'd never documented anything formally. A second colleague, a parts supply coordinator who had been there 9 years, described a situation where her quarterly performance bonus had been recalculated in a way that didn't match what she'd been told at the start of the quarter. She'd questioned it. Frank had told her the calculation method had always been what he was now describing. She hadn't been able to prove otherwise and had dropped it. A pattern, not isolated to me. Not a response to my specific deal, a pattern of adjusting compensation after performance had already been delivered. I brought this to Christine. She listened, asked several specific questions, and then said that what I was describing, combined with my own documentation, potentially constituted a broader pattern of wage theft that was worth pursuing differently than a simple individual claim. She recommended we send a letter. Not to Frank, to the company's board of directors. The letter was 8 pages. It detailed my specific claim, the original commission structure, the completed sale, the retroactively dated document, the calculation of the withheld amount. It detailed the 2 additional cases I had documented through conversations with colleagues, to the extent those colleagues had agreed to have their situations referenced. Both of them, once I explained the full picture to them, had agreed. And it included a legal analysis from Christine of the specific statutes under which the described conduct constituted actionable wage theft, along with a reference to the potential regulatory reporting obligations the board now had given that the letter had formally put them on notice. It closed with a settlement demand, my full commission, plus legal fees, and a 14-day response window before we filed formally. Christine sent it by certified mail and electronic delivery simultaneously. We received a call from the company's legal counsel within 72 hours. I'm going to walk through the next 6 weeks quickly, because some of it is under the terms of what eventually got signed. But here is what I can tell you. Frank was not in the room for any of the conversations that followed. This was, I suspected, not an accident. The negotiation took about 5 weeks. Christine was very good at her job. The settlement I received was the full commission amount, $180,000, plus legal fees. My two colleagues each received retroactive adjustments to their compensation based on the situations they had described, handled separately, but as part of the same broader resolution. I left the company as part of the settlement, which was fine. 11 years was long enough, and the kind of trust that evaporates in the moment your boss slides a Tuesday-dated document across a desk on a Wednesday morning doesn't really come back. The last thing I'll tell you about Frank specifically is this. About 4 months after I left, I heard through someone still at the company that the Meridian account, the one I had spent 3 years building and 14 months closing, had run into problems. The transition had been managed after I left by someone who hadn't been involved in the relationship from the beginning. There had been service delays, communication gaps, the kind of friction that develops when a new account doesn't have the specific relationship foundation that made it possible in the first place. Meridian had gone back to their previous supplier before the end of the year. The biggest account in the company's history, gone. Not because of anything I did, just because the person who built it was no longer there, and the person who had tried to steal the commission from building it turned out not to have understood what the commission had actually paid for. Here is what I think this story is actually about. Frank looked at $180,000 and saw a number that was inconvenient. He didn't see the 3 years of lunch meetings. He didn't see the 14 months of proposal work. He didn't see the relationship that had made Meridian possible in the first place. He just saw the number and decided, on a Tuesday evening, that the number was too large to honor. What he also didn't see was 11 years of documentation. A lawyer who specialized in exactly this. 2 colleagues who had been waiting, without knowing they were waiting, for someone to finally say something. And a board of directors who, when formally put on notice of a potential wage theft pattern, had a very powerful incentive to resolve the situation quietly and completely. The money was the obvious thing. The less obvious thing is this. Meridian came to us because of a relationship I built. It left when that relationship was gone. The commission Frank tried to keep was a fraction of what that account would have been worth over the life of the relationship. He saved $50,000. He lost a $2.3 million account, 2 experienced employees whose trust he'd permanently broken, and a board that now had a formal documented record of his compensation practices sitting in a legal file somewhere. Some calculations look different depending on which side of the desk you're sitting on. That's karma filed. Real work, real documentation, real consequences that the math eventually makes inevitable. If this one hit you, and I think it might, you know what to do. Subscribe, hit the bell, there are more of these waiting. And if you've ever had commission stolen or a bonus quietly disappear, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. I'll see you in next video.